Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of College and Career Coffee Chats with Delicia. I'm your host, Delicia Alarcon, your resident hype tia, or your fellowship fairy godmother. However you would like to describe me as, I'm here for you. This is another episode of interviews and guest speakers coming in to chat with me about being a first generation, how to navigate imposter syndrome, how to navigate the world today in the work environment, the application process, the undergraduate admissions, and the graduate admissions process. We're here together to chat about it, to peel back the layers, to peel back the curtain behind what happens in higher education, to really provide the skills and the tools necessary to succeed in whatever that goal is for you. So make sure you have your coffee, your energy drink, or tea, whatever you want to listen in on this conversation between my guests, my colleagues, and my friends. And make sure you stay tuned so you can get access to all the free goodies and the gifts that I have created for you as it relates to training, about scholarships, about resume writing, about cover letter, anything that you need in the process. I've created some gifts for you so you can download those instantly and have access to the workbooks and the trainings. And stay tuned if you would like to join the Facebook group and the community to connect with everyone. So, without further ado, let's listen in on our guests and our conversations. Cheers. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the College and Career Coffee Chats. Today I have Alejandra Alarcon, and as of yet, we don't know if we're related. Fun story, my cousin is also Alejandra Alarcon, so when I saw her name, I was like, oh my God. So maybe we're distant cousins, colonialism and all these things. And I'm so excited to have her on here. We are going to talk all things college and career and from her lived experiences. So I'm going to share a little bit about her so you know a little intro. So she is a public opinion researcher, first generation college graduate, and proud Los Angeles native. She is the research communications coordinator at the Center for the Study of Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount University, where she focuses on data reporting and data visualizations. We'll chat a little bit about what that means through this talk. And her research interests include race relations, local and state politics, and elections. In her spare time, you can find her reading, rollerblading, or listening to a narrative podcast. So before we dive into all these fun things, let's cheers our little homemade coffee today.
Cheers.
Cheers. So if you hear us slurping or like putting this down, that's what it is. That's the background noise, because it's a coffee shop, so we got to have coffee or soda or tea or whatever floats your boat. Make sure you have it with you so you can listen in on our little chat. So thank you so much, Alejandra, for being here with us. And I still find it hilarious that we have the same last name.
Yeah, I thank you so much for having me. I rarely find people with my same last name, so I was really excited too. But to your point, yeah, like colonialism probably did something around there somewhere. Because you mentioned your family is from Portugal? Is that?
No, my family's from Paraguay.
Paraguay.
Yes.
Completely different.
And your family's from Nicaragua, right?
Yes, yeah.
So one of my uncles is from Nicaragua, but his last name is not Alarcon.
Probably if you go really far back in the family tree somewhere, somehow.
Yeah, I want to do like a ancestry.com, or I don't even know if that results give you the like name and what region of Spain. But when I studied abroad in Spain, I saw a lot of street names that had Alarcon in it. So I was like taking pictures with all those street names, trying to figure out, okay, who are my ancestors? Who are these Spaniards, right? That are part of our cultural heritage mixed with the probably indigenous communities of our country. So fun fact, my friends. And Alejandra and I met through a Facebook group for first generation students. So we have this shared identity of being from immigrant parents and also first generation identity. So after reading your bio and all the things you do, how do you define first generation for yourself? Because we have our textbook definition that's like on the census and all the other places, and researchers use it. But how do you, as Alejandra, define it?
Yeah, so most of growing up, I just defined first gen as being the daughter of immigrants. I'm the first person in my family to be born in the United States, my siblings included. And so that was something that I was always cognizant of, because my parents, their stories of growing up were not stories of growing up in America. And my mom, it was really important to her that we grew up going to Nicaragua, visiting regularly. So like once a year, once every other year. And so just kind of the difference between how I was growing up in California versus how my family was growing up in Nicaragua, like those things were very obvious to me. But I would say my definition of being first gen changed when I got to college, because college was a really big culture shock for me for many reasons. I grew up going to public schools. I grew up in a working class community. I grew up in a predominantly Latino community. And college was the complete opposite. I went to a private Catholic school. It was predominantly white, although it's been about 23% Latino and growing. And that's like when I also really noticed class differences. And so you have this idea of like the curriculum that you learn in college, but then there's also the idea of the hidden curriculum. So like what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't even know what you don't know. And I found myself tripping over that last category all the time. Thankfully, when I was a freshman, our university started it's called First to Go. So it's a program for first generation college students. And they were able to provide me with a network of other first gen scholars like myself, but more importantly, first gen faculty and staff. So kind of having a mentorship program of hearing, getting to talk to people who were beyond the point where I was, and kind of getting to pick their brain about their professional endeavors, but also like how their personal lives and how their first gen identity has shaped or helped them get to where they are.
I love that, the hidden curriculum, and then the hidden curriculum of not knowing certain things just because we didn't grow up navigating those spaces, or existing in certain spaces and being kept out of certain communities and conversations. And I love that, because when you graduate and you start the workforce as a first gen, right, there's this myth that, oh, you graduated college, you're set, you're good to go, like you're not first gen anymore. It's like, no, this follows me throughout my whole career, my whole life. So then the professional field is like, there's another hidden agenda and curriculum as to how you navigate those spaces. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have these coffee chats with people, because we are young first generation professionals navigating these spaces, and hopefully our experiences can help high school students or current college students coming up into the professional realm to learn from our experiences and maybe not make the same mistakes, or just kind of put themselves ahead from our experiences. So what are some of the things from that hidden curriculum that you learned that maybe you wish you had known, or maybe like a textbook, and not a textbook, a rule book, or like a guide that we wish we had?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much. I think I was afraid to ask questions and seek answers as a student. Like, I don't know, I can't remember if it's like I felt like it wasn't allowed or I wasn't supposed to, or I didn't want to seem like less informed than my peers. But one of the things that I found, especially if you're able to find that network of other first-gen professionals and students, is people are willing to help. And if you ask somebody for something and they don't have the information or the answer that you need, a lot of the times they're willing to point you in a different direction towards someone who does. And that's something that I felt like I learned a little too late as an undergraduate student, but it has really come in handy as I've navigated my professional realm, and I'm starting to think about graduate school and just kind of other options as well. And just kind of having that confidence of like, you know what, I don't know the answer to this. So instead of kind of struggling through it, let me find someone or something that can point me in the right direction. having that kind of confidence has been really, really helpful. I think the other thing too is I'm sure everyone has a lot to say about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
That's something that, I mean, frankly, I'm still not over. But I can manage it a little better now than when I was in college. And I think had I known that I'm not the only one feeling this way, and it's a completely normal feeling, but it is something to overcome, I think also having that knowledge would have been tremendously helpful.
Yes, absolutely. We don't know what we don't know. So learning to ask questions and not be afraid to maybe sound dumb or like, oh, how do you not know this already? It's because we didn't grow up in like an environment where our parents knew how to navigate college in the US. I mean, they love us and they want us to succeed and they help us through what they can. But some things they just don't know, right? So for me too, it was so instrumental to have mentors on campus to ask questions and feel safe to mess up. And I think one of those things at Fairfield, where I graduated, they had TRIO student support services. And so I was part of their Project Excel program for FirstGen students. And I was able to have access to an academic counselor and support system through her. And then she also advocated and connected me with people on campus. So I think for anyone listening to check out if your school has a student support services program, or like you said, the first generation programming that they started your first year to really connect you with administrators and staff on campus who want you to succeed and want you to do well. And ask for help, I think is so, so important. Even as professionals, right? We're scared of asking our manager maybe because we don't want to sound dumb. And I want to talk a little bit more about imposter syndrome, since it seems to be something that keeps coming up in my conversations with students, but also with other professionals that we're doing these coffee chats with. How do you, there's a textbook definition for imposter syndrome that I'll link in the show notes. There's an article that explains it, and then the New York Times also talks a little bit about it and other articles, but I want to know how you define it and what are some kind of things that you do to understand, oh, this is imposter syndrome coming up, and how do you what do you do to navigate, to like give people listening some tools to really move past that?
Yeah, to me, imposter syndrome is that little voice in my head that creeps up when I don't expect it, at the worst possible time. And a lot of the times I don't feel like I'm able to recognize that it's coming. I recognize it once it's settled in.
Oh, okay.
And I think I still struggle with like, wait, hold on. Like, it's not that you don't know what you're doing, or it's not that like you're not qualified for this. It's you're getting to yourself again. One of the things that I found really helpful, and this is just kind of like a small practical thing, is in my Outlook I have a folder called Smiles. It's just called Smiles. And every time I get some sort of an email that makes me smile, which is either like my supervisor or a colleague or a student who like thanks me for helping them with something or compliments me or something like that, I just drop it in that inbox folder. And whenever I feel like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm just not feeling great about whatever, like I kind of just open that inbox folder up and just like, okay, like we've had this feeling before. Everything turned out fine. It was fine. But I think another thing that's helpful is just recognizing that most people don't always know what they're doing, or it's okay to not have all of the answers at once. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being a researcher, that my job is to quite literally like find answers. And embracing either discovery or unknown as part of the process. And again, trying to like pull in as many resources as you have, whether they be in people or just kind of like knowing like here are websites or books, I mean, whatever the endeavor is, but
Right.
recognizing that whatever it is that's causing you to have this imposter syndrome is not something that you need to face or overcome alone.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that idea of a smiles folder. I have something similar. I think I call it like happiness or something, where I have maybe emails from students or staff that like uplifts you. And then I have a physical box of like notes, like when I left certain jobs or when I went to Brazil for my grant and other experiences and they did like goodbye parties, they had handwritten notes. So I took all of those with me when I went to Brazil, for example, and really had no one from my immediate community to support me physically. I mean, virtually, obviously they did, but in person until you build that community again in your new space. So I would, when I was feeling it like an imposter or that I didn't belong, I would read those letters and would read those notes as a reminder to understand that you have the skills that you do and you are where you need to be in those moments. And you've, like you said, you've done it before, so it's okay. It'll be okay. And something neat that they did when I was taught in South Carolina, I was part of the Eucharistic ministers on campus, and they all wrote, I received like 100 letters in my first year of teaching. And that was really, really helpful as I navigated that first year because it was so tough for many reasons, right? Your first year out of college is transitions after transitions, navigating after navigating. And that was really helpful. So if you're listening, I encourage you to save those notes and save those emails because that really helps you when you're feeling really lost or alone or sad in many ways. And I love what you said about research and the work that you do as part of the unknown, as part of the process and being okay with that unknown. So how do you work in this research field, and how do you talk about the work that you do with maybe your parents or your colleagues, I mean, not your colleagues, your parents or like your family members that may not understand specifically how to explain what you do, right? Like if I say I work in higher ed, my grandma's like, oh, she's the dean. Like she's up there. I'm like, not yet, abuela, like maybe one day.
Thank you for believing in me.
Yeah, thank you for believing me. Or like, yeah, she's the president of the university. You're like, nope, not there yet, but thanks.
Yeah. Before I touch on that, I wanted to add one more thing to what we just talked about, and that was like I'm in academia. I produce academic work, and so whenever there's a report or a project or just really anything that I'm proud of, keeping a hard copy of it. And I think I really like that idea of having a box of just things to kind of go back to. But I think we have this tendency to remember like the times that we messed up or the times that things didn't work out, even though a lot of the times we have so many more experiences that are not that. And I think being able to just kind of go back and like, okay, no, like I've got this. Like I produced this report or I wrote this paper or here's my diploma. Like I did this. It's good to revisit those things. But at the same time, like I think you and I, it sounds like we both share this experience of hearing encouragement and support that's been really helpful. I think for me, something that's been really important is also making sure that I'm providing that support and encouragement to my friends, to my peers, especially now that we're pretty established in what kind of like our careers are and where they're going. If there are opportunities, like if you're speaking at an event, okay, like let me try to go. If you did a podcast interview, let me try to listen to it. If you're throwing this event, let me try to attend. So recognizing that in the same way that we need support, giving it back to our peers, our friends, our colleagues. I think that helps. But to your second question, I still struggle with this. I majored in Chicana, Chicano, Latina, Latino studies. It's an interdisciplinary field. I don't know how to explain the interdisciplinary fields to my parents. A lot of the times, the identity Chicana, Chicano is conflated to only be understood as Mexican American. And so my mom's like, why did you get a degree in Mexican American studies? We're Central American. And like, I know why. because in part the institution that I went to, that's kind of the closest thing to Central American studies that I could take. And at the same time, Chicano studies has provided me with frameworks, with theories, with literature that don't exactly translate over to exactly explain the Central American experience, but does provide me a starting point. But that's a really academic answer, and I can't, like, that's not going to go well in a conversation with my mom.
I know. I love the academic answers. I got all the frameworks. I got it all.
My mom attended my senior capstone presentation, and it was like this very theoretical thing grounded in Chicana feminist theory. It was an institutional structural analysis, and I would like look at her, he's just going over your head, which is so tough because it's my lived experience that has given me kind of like the case studies, if you will, of like how to like approach this work. So I can take those experiences and bring them into academia, but I'm not able to take academia and bring it back to my lived experiences necessarily. Everything I know about public opinion research, I've learned on the job.
Okay.
But my academic work didn't directly lead to this. It's just an opportunity that came up, and I took it. And I'm glad that I did. I don't think my parents quite understand that jump either. Explaining public opinion research can be tough in general. A lot of people only recognize it as kind of like polling when it comes to election time, or understand it as kind of like a survey on SurveyMonkey, and that's like the extent of it. Or may not understand public opinion research specifically, or like how it can be beneficial. That's already difficult at times to explain. Trying to do that in Spanish, a whole other monster. If you were to translate the word researcher into Spanish, it's investigadora, which sounds like investigator, which sounds like I'm with the FBI. and no, I'm not with the FBI. I'm in academia. So there are challenges. One of the things that's really helpful is being in Los Angeles, there is a predominantly Spanish-speaking population. And so it gives us our research center impetus to engage with Spanish-speaking communities as well, whether that be making sure that our reports are also in Spanish, finding opportunities to present our research to groups that are predominantly Spanish speakers, or our center's director will sometimes do media interviews in Spanish as well, whether it be on radio or on television. And so my vested interest in partaking in projects like that, pursuing them and seeing them out, is that then I can turn to my mom and like, hey, like La Opinión wrote this article and it features some of the work that I've done. Would you mind, like, can you please read this? Or here's this presentation that we gave at a Pico Union town hall, check it out. And so I let my work do the talking for me.
I love that. Going back to what you said about having a physical copy of your accomplishments, like a binder of your articles that you've written or papers that you did really well on, or your senior thesis, to remind you of those great accomplishments you had along the way, I think is so important. And the part about the research you do or you did with your Chicana studies, I've always thought of this question because I grew up on the East Coast. So I think more Central South American immigrants, and there are Mexican immigrants here and Mexican Americans here as well. But I think the Chicana identity is more Midwest and West Coast. So I'm really happy that you brought that up, because even though that you may not identify as Chicana, or like your mom's comment, why did you study this if you're not Mexican? I love that you say the frameworks give you a starting point to then develop them maybe for Central and Southern American identity, because I think I have the same experience with being my family from Paraguay, and I identify Paraguayan American or Paraguaya many times because I had lived in Paraguay for about 4 to 5 years. So I have a unique experience because I hold that in-country lived experience. So I can identify to a lot of things with that, and then re-entering the US and that's other experience, right? But I love Gloria Anzaldua's work, Borderlands, because even though she writes in the 3 different languages and she identifies as Chicana or Chicanx, in that book, her framework, it literally like made me cry the whole book. I was like, this is me, even though I'm not Mexican or Mexican American. The framework is what helps you navigate your lived experience. So if you are Hispanic, Latina, however you identify, Chicano, Chicana, Paraguayan American, Nicaragua, Peru, Argentina, Uruguay, all the countries, please read this book, especially if you are identify as a woman, femme, whatever your identity markers are. Read this book because it really, really, I think for me, helped me navigate this third world identity that she talks about and the borderlands of existing in both and not existing anywhere. Or she used another word. Yes. So yeah. What are your thoughts on that? And like, did you read that book? Is that part of your studies? Like, I feel like that's such an important connection that we have, and maybe our listeners also feel identified with that.
Yeah, like many other people who study Chicana feminist theory, Gloria Anzaldúa changed my life. I had the privilege of reading her book, the very first Chicano studies course that I took in college. Okay. And that's really like what prompted me to like, I want to study this further. But I think it was the first time that I read a book and I saw myself in it. Prior to taking this course, I was taking classes in computer science. So, I mean, no one really sees themselves in computer science. But in my K-12 education, like every now and then there may have been like a poem in an anthology collection or like maybe a novel where like I kind of maybe related to, but I think because we've prioritized one experience and one perspective and centralized that in our public education system, I didn't realize it was possible to see something that like is not tangentially related, but actually speaks to my experience. Mm-hmm. I didn't have a lot of money in college, but I was at a conference where the publisher of Borderlands La Frontera had just worked on releasing the 5th edition, and they had copies on sale, and it was on sale for like $25.99, which was like a lot of money for me in college. And it was like, no, like I have to have this book. And so I do. But Gloria Anzaldúa, going back to a question about like things to get over imposter syndrome, there are certain books that I keep on my shelf, Borderlands being one of them. There's a really good collection of short stories called The Moths by Elena Maria Viramontes, Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider. There are certain books that I own these books and I'm not letting anyone borrow them because I am not taking my chances and them not coming back to me. That whenever they're books that have been really instrumental to me at some point in my life, maybe in college, and then they've always just kind of stuck with me, that whenever imposter syndrome does kind of creep up on me, or something, because The Moths is actually like a personal story about like a granddaughter assisting her grandmother who is dying of cancer, which is kind of more or less similar to an experience that I had, so a little different. But whenever there's like something, whenever I need extra support and encouragement, I turn to these feminist theorists and I let their words guide me. I'm moving toward more and more toward writing, and like many people, I get writer's block or I get writer's anxiety, where I forget how words work. I forget how to form sentences. And sometimes writing a paragraph can take a long time because a lot of the times because I feel like my words aren't worthy. And every time I take on a major writing project, I turn to a letter that Gloria Anzaldúa wrote, and I think it's featured in This Bridge Called My Back, which is a collection of essays she co-edited with, I want to say Chevy Moraga.
Yes, yeah. I can look it up really quick while you continue.
I hope I got that right. Otherwise, But
Rosario Morales.
okay. But
Oh no,
Gloria,
you're right. Wait, I'm sorry. Author Rosario Morales, editors Chedi Moraga and Gloria Anzaldúa. So
all right. Yes, we're good.
we're good.
There's a letter that Gloria Anzaldúa, I think it was actually a talk that she gave at a conference, in which she talked about why it's important for women of color to write, to share stories. And it is because we read so many stories that aren't written by women of color, and therefore don't share the perspectives or the insights of women of color, but our experiences, our thoughts, our ideas are valid, are important, and offer different perspectives to look at. And that's why, like, it's not that we should be encouraged to write, it's our duty to write. So all of that, and I'm like, she's right. She said it was my duty. I have to do this.
You have to honor her legacy.
Yes.
Yes, I love that, because I think writer's block and that feeling of not being worthy to write your story or your words are can be translated into the workforce or college, right? Because you may want to take on a research assignment or a research project, or shadow a professor that does the research you want to do, and you feel unworthy. And how do you overcome that, and what tools do we learn along the way to do that? And also, if you want to be a screenwriter or an actor or a computer scientist, or go be an astronaut to go to the moon, right? These different, the common thread is this feeling of unworthiness, and that we shouldn't take up this space. But like you said, reading that article by Gloria Anzaldúa really gives you the energy and the strength to say, no, you know what? It's my duty. It's my responsibility. It's my way of honoring maybe someone we admire like Gloria Anzaldúa, or honoring our ancestors that couldn't write, or that were forbidden to write, to read, to learn, right? Our ancestors couldn't go to school. They were murdered if they wanted to do something like that. So I think when we put it in that context of that global macro level responsibility and duty, I mean, not to burden you and be like, oh my God, like this is a lot, but more like to empower you, to give you strength to say, yes, my story is worthy of telling, even if it's through writing, through reading, through going to school, through being an astronaut, through whatever vessel you use to tell that story. Is yes, it's worthy. Yes, you should do it. Yes, let's make it happen. Like, we want to hear it.
Yeah.
I'll share the article that she's talking about in the show notes too, if you want to read it. Pretty prepared to cry, bring some tissues. I know I cried a lot when I was reading that book. And not in, oh God.
I don't know if this was your experience, but like I found myself, like, I was never crying over the same thing. Like sometimes it was like a cathartic cry, and sometimes it was like the realization of like the whole world, I see it differently now. Like I've been denied of so much, or I haven't had these experiences. And other times, like, she just got deep.
Yes. For me too, I think several cries were like, oh my gosh, she understands my story. I feel seen. I feel heard. Another time was, oh, this is a new framework and a new lens through which I see the world. And or crying because, oh my God, this is such a big realization through the way I was either raised or taught in school, right? I went to public school system in the US as well. So how we were deprived of so many stories and authors of color that could have enriched our experience, right? And it's like, not to blame anyone for that, but that's the system that we grow up in. So I think when we get to our spaces now, that's why we're having these chats, is to like encourage people to read different stories and also tell different stories, not the central narrative that we constantly hear. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like so mmany quotes. I mean, I can pull up the quotes that I cried about because I have it saved. Because when I was doing my started my master's program, I did research on her, and we read that book in class again. So it was like a third time I was reading it. So I was like, different parts connected in different phases. So like you, I have that book like on my bedstand, like when I'm feeling some type of way, I just grab it and like I have a million Post-its in it. So I'm like, when I'm feeling this way, I go to this Post-it or this Post-it.
I find myself always turning back to theory.
Mhm.
Because you could, like, I mean, Borderlands La Frontera is a book that comes up in so many different classes in college, and not just like in ethnic studies or women and gender studies, but in political science and urban studies, because you can not, well, I guess interpret it differently, but apply it differently depending on like what the task at hand is, what the assignment is, what it is. It's a good framework to like, okay, like this is what I have to think about what's in front of me.
Right. Let's see. I'm trying to find some quotes from my presentation really quickly. In case you don't know who she is or haven't read her work, I want you to at least hear it on this talk, something from her directly. So let me just, I think this is one of the great quotes that I used in my presentation to define Borderlands or La Frontera. So I'll read it really quickly if you don't mind.
Oh no, I'm excited.
So the U.S.-Mexican border is una herida abierta, where the third world grates against the first and bleeds. And before a scab forms, it hemorrhages again, the lifeblood of two worlds merging to form a third country, a border culture. See, I'm already getting choked up. Borders are set up to define the places that are safe and unsafe, to distinguish us from them.
Yeah, I think it's a common thing for first generation children to feel this, like, well, the United States doesn't, I'm not American enough for the United States, and I'm not Nicaraguan enough for Nicaragua. And I think that the amazing thing about coming across Enzo Dua's work, but also Chicano studies in college, is that prior to that, it was just a feeling that I had, and one that like I kept to myself, and not one that I realized like, oh, everyone feels this way, but there's like something that can be done with that, like that is a valid experience that can inform work, whether it be in academia or in the nonprofit sector or in government or in all of our experiences, whatever they are, can inform the work that we do, that one included.
Right. Absolutely. That feeling that can transmute and turn into something, right? Using that for research or writing or creating a movie or whatever creative outlet you need. So I'm trying to think of the other author that is also has good frameworks. Her book is like under my desk right now, but I'll get it later. I'll add it later. So what are some things that you found interesting transitioning to public opinion research from majoring Chicana studies and Latin American studies to, I know you said that you kind of fell into this work. I'm curious to hear that journey and that experience, because I think some students realize that, oh, I majored in one thing, but I don't necessarily have to work in that thing. It can inform my work, but it doesn't really have to be a direct line to that work. So I'm curious to hear your experiences with that.
Yeah, what I'll start with by saying is, one of the things I wish I had done in college was be honest with myself, in that, like, if I had interest or curiosities, allow myself the space to explore those. And I say that because earlier I mentioned I started college taking several computer science courses. I went to a high school that was focused on STEM. And so I was very aware of what opportunities there were in STEM fields. And I pursued them because I felt that it's what I had to do, that it was the good thing to do, that it was going to be like the safe plan to do. And it is for some people, but it just wasn't interesting to me. And it took several years for me to make a switch from the sciences and engineering to the social sciences. But even then, like why Chicano studies was such a good fit for me is because it was interdisciplinary, and um, when I was at a space and time when I couldn't yet vocalize, like these are my interests and this is what I want to do, I got the option of getting to choose a lot of different things. Um, I think had I been more honest with myself and explored my curiosity, I would have arrived at public opinion research much sooner, or social science research in general. But again, so my major was interdisciplinary. The center where I work at now, our director is a professor of political science, but he's also a professor in Chicana, Latino, Latino studies. So I had taken some of these courses. It was great. Like one semester I was taking like this class focused entirely on La Virgen de Guadalupe. And then like the next class, like here's like racial and ethnic politics in Los Angeles. And so it's like completely different. But his courses focused on, or they still focus on racial and ethnic politics, Los Angeles politics, California politics. And like the story that he tells is the story of Los Angeles politics and California politics is the integration of previously excluded racial and ethnic groups into our political system. So like one of the big theories that we talk about in those courses, I actually assist with those courses now, is you look at the population, you look at of the population, how many folks were eligible to vote, how many people of those people actually went out to vote, and then what resulted of that, what was the racial and ethnic makeup of elected officials in California. And you see that as California, Los Angeles the population continued to grow Latino and continued to grow Democrat, how like that had a ripple effect that you see like our elected officials become that way as well. That fascinated me because it was like a combination of like research and also like civic engagement and advocacy, which were things that were important to me. I just didn't like realize they were important to me. But after I graduated from college, that professor gave me the opportunity to work at a public affairs consulting firm as a research assistant, where I learned how these theories applied in a very practical way at the intersection of government and business. And I did that for a few months, but after that was done, there was an opportunity to work at the research center. And I thought I wasn't going to be there a long time. It was also in kind of an entry-level role, so I knew that I didn't have to know a lot about research to be a research assistant there. So I took on that role. But what ended up finding out is, I learned a lot about research and that I was interested in it, that I really liked it. And thankfully, I have a work environment that is really encouraging and supportive of learning and following your interests and learning more about what your interests are. So over the years, I learned about social science research methodology. I've learned about public opinion research. I learned a lot about Los Angeles. I've learned about a lot of our politics. I've learned a lot about elections. And I've been there for 5.5 years. In the last year or so, my role has constantly changed because I've learned so much, because I'm more aware of what my interests are. But now I'm at a place where okay, let me form my own research projects. Let me inform our work with more of my research interests. Let me pursue those, and let's see what I can bring back to the research center. A lot of that took all of the knowledge and experience that I've had over the years, but it also took confidence in myself and kind of going back to the idea of imposter syndrome. It also took being comfortable and okay and accepting of the fact that it's fine that I don't know what I'm doing or I don't know the answers. Literally the point of this job is to find the answers. That uncertainty is part of it.
I love that. That's the point.
I feel like that just went in so many different directions. I don't even know.
Oh no. Oh yeah. It was it's an insight into the journey of undergrad and your professional life, because I started as a major in psychology and Spanish with a minor ed studies. And then sophomore year, I went to the business school for like a hot second. And I took a couple business classes. And then I was like, just kidding. I love my research. I love my social science academic framework, understanding of the world versus marketing 101. Though marketing 101 is important in many ways, I felt that I could make a bigger impact understanding the social sciences. And I wanted to be a licensed therapist. And then I was like, just kidding, never mind. So I think that's part of the journey, and that's okay to go back and forth and be honest with yourself. Like you said, be honest with yourself and be curious as to what it is you want to study and learn, which is, I think, really hard for FirstGen or immigrant children that maybe have a culture of parents or grandparents who say, oh, you have to be three things: a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer, which are great fields and amazing if that's your calling. However, if it's not, it puts people like maybe us who are more social sciencey and want to study interdisciplinary things and more like research-based things in a position to say, well, how do I go up against this huge cultural pressure and societal pressure when I'm just me trying to be curious on what I want to study. So that's where you need support. That's where you need help. That's where you need to find people who are going to help you process and navigate that experience, because there are stories that like parents will disown their kids if they don't study certain things, or they will cut off financial support. And those are very real life situations that as a counselor I saw. So we have to delicately navigate this. But if you're in a position to make these choices for yourself and you have support from your family, do it. Be curious, study what you want to study, listen to yourself, be honest to yourself, which I think you, through your story and your journey, have shared with us that it's important to listen to that.
Yeah, and to your point, like I was really fortunate in my mom, like education was important.
Yeah.
It was great. Like in middle school, I was like, Mom, I want an iPod. She's like, we don't know. It's like, but here are these books. Like, okay. In retrospect, like awesome. I buy a lot of books now, and my mom's like, why they're taking up space, and I'll tell her, well, this is your fault.
Me too.
But I was really lucky in that my mom didn't pressure me to like become a lawyer or a doctor or engineer. I actually applied those pressures onto myself. But that doesn't mean that I haven't had to have, I wouldn't say difficult, but like tricky conversations with my mom about my journey along the way. Like when I stopped doing computer science and moved over to the social sciences, in part, my mom was confused with, I moved into the humanities, social sciences into my career. But when I moved to humanities, my mom, first of all, didn't quite understand what that meant. And also didn't understand, like, why would you make that jump from something that's practical and have a very clear career trajectory lined up and well, quite frankly, will pay, into something that has a lot more uncertainty. And in that moment, I really am thankful that my mom trusted me with that. Like, Mom, this is the decision for me. Please trust me. But that, again, like that doesn't mean like there haven't been like weird or difficult or tricky conversations since then. I have a cousin who I'm really proud of. She's a PhD student at the University of California at Santa Barbara in biochemistry. So she will be the first in our family to be a doctor. But when she started graduate school, she's 3 years younger than me, 4 years younger than me. My mom was like, when are you going to graduate school? And I kind of had to like go into this whole explanation of like, like it's not like step 1, step 2, step 3. Like it's not like a straight line path, Mom. Like going into a PhD program is what my cousin wanted for herself, and it made sense for her to do it at that time. And it just doesn't make sense for me to do it right now, or to have done it 3 years ago, or when I had graduated in college or whatever. And then like and now I'm ready to take that step to go to graduate school, but I'm looking at master's programs, and my mom's like, well, why are you stopping there? Why don't you get a PhD? And like having to explain like a PhD really isn't for everyone.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of people who have completed that process, because it's difficult, it's challenging at times, and it's a really great accomplishment, but it's just not something that I want for myself. And my mom's like, what do you mean you don't want to be a doctor? Hold on, that wasn't the plan. So I punt to my younger sister, who's an undergrad, and I'm like, you need to get a PhD so I can get mom off my back.
Yes, you need to get that Dr. Alarcon so they can stop pressure. And it's the same with like, you need to be married because your cousin's married, or you need to start having kids because your cousin has kids. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let's put the blinders on. What does Alicia want?
Yeah, I'm the oldest. No, not the oldest. I'm like 8 out of like 12. But my older cousins are like, there's a gap, so I'm the oldest, like of like the end of the cousins.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I hope none of my younger cousins get married before I do, because that's when those conversations will start.
Oh yeah, that's definitely a conversation in all of, I think, the Latino families that and not only Latinos, this happens across the board cultures, right? Comparison and pressure to do certain things. And it's having those conversations with your parents or your siblings or your cousins or aunts and uncles, abuelas, to sit them down and be like, I appreciate the love and the concern, but this is the life plan that I want. This is how I want to navigate my life. And really make them a part of that process and have that conversation, but also set a boundary in a way and say, hey, this is how I want to do it. And I appreciate your love and support, but I might not meet all your expectations that you want to have or put on me. And I'm okay with that. Right. And that's a journey, that's a process, because we have, are you the oldest daughter?
I'm the oldest daughter, but I'm not the oldest. I have a brother, and that, I love my brother, but it sets up a really fun dynamic for a Latino family where I'm constantly like, to your point, like setting boundaries. I'm like letting my mom know, like, you know what, I'm not going to meet all of your expectations. You might be disappointed. I find myself having those conversations that my brother doesn't necessarily have with my mom. And my brother didn't go to college, but I did. And sometimes I tell my mom, like, okay, mom, like, manage expectations, please. Because sometimes I tell her, like, I feel like you're a little harder on me, but and not to like put my brother down, but I ultimately I feel like I've done more, like, and I haven't stopped, and I keep going, and you're telling me, or you're making me feel sometimes like it's not enough, and I don't see you putting this pressure on your son. It's a difficult conversation. It's one that like I'm very strategic about when we're gonna have it, if we're gonna have it, and it's usually like when I've decided we've reached the point where like, no, I'm gonna pick that battle. But it's a difficult one, because how do you, and I think this touches to another thing, a much bigger thing, that like, how do you have that conversation without like, and I'm with the disclaimer of, I'm not putting anyone down because they didn't go to college.
Right.
That's a choice, and it works out for people. It could be a good choice for other people. But I think that also speaks to like, I said I had culture shock when I got to college. I felt like I also started having culture shock at home because I was in college. Maybe not culture shock is the right word for that, but like there were like things that were weird at home.
Right.
I was in college. And no one else was, and I had no one in my corner to speak to those experiences, because I was the first person in my family to go to college.
Right. And like you said, it's not to put down anyone who doesn't choose to go to college or doesn't choose a master's or a PhD program. It's about, I think what Alejandra and I are talking about right now is like making a choice that's right for you at whatever point in your life that is, right? Because community college might be the right choice, to help you transition and navigate to a 4-year college, right? A 4-year college might not be the right choice in that moment. And that's okay, regardless of what society tells you, guidance counselors tell you, parents, friends, right? Or family members. I think it's about discerning what really works for you on an individual basis, because at the end of the day, you have to show up at this work, you have to show up in class, you have to show up in these spaces. So I think that's another reason why I wanted to have these chats, is because I want students and listeners to really understand that you're not alone in navigating all these different things that Alejandra and I are talking about today, but also maybe provide tips and tools on how to do that. And like you said, you have to sometimes be strategic with when and how you talk to parents or friends or colleagues about certain things, because it matters when you bring up those conversations. Because I also think it touches upon like respect, right? In the Latino family, we have this cultural teaching that we have to respect our elders and respect our parents, which is great. But as we enter adulthood and as we enter young professional world, we also want to navigate certain ways and conversations in certain ways that speak to that adulthood, but sometimes you're not viewed as that adult in many ways, especially if you're living at home still, or whatever that family dynamic is. It's very nuanced, I think, in the Latino household. And then we have gender roles on top of that. So I'm loving this conversation and deconstructing that and sharing our lived experience to help maybe younger Latinas really navigate that.
Yeah. I wanted to touch on something you mentioned earlier. If I could give advice to my younger self,
oh yeah,
I would put the option of community college before me. I don't know that I would have taken that option, but the way I went to a college prep focused school where going to a 4-year was prioritized. And in California, we have 2 university systems. And unfortunately, one is viewed as like better than the other. They're both great. And so like the priority was to like, one, go to a 4-year institution. If you were going to go to a 4-year, one system over the other. But really, like, you should go to private school. And so, like, at no point was I thinking about community college. And I didn't understand what a great option that is until my sister went to community college.
Okay.
And unfortunately, when she started, she felt really insecure about that decision. She felt like she had messed up or done something bad. And I think she felt like that for a little bit, but honestly, I think my sister had a much more richer experience in community college than I had my first 2 years as undergrad at a 4-year. My sister is an anthropology major with a focus on archaeology, and through her program at her school, she's able to do 3 different field research trips where she spent 1 month excavating in Belize. She did that twice for 2 years. And then she spent 6 weeks in Portugal on another excavation trip. She was a part of 2 different honor societies. She joined different clubs. She had a really, really rich community college experience, and like now she's continuing that. She just transferred. But she's much more confident in like the kinds of things that she wants to do with the remaining of her time in undergrad at her institution than I feel like I ever was in college. I feel like I was constantly like tripping around, like trying to like find out like, oh, we have an office for that. How do you do this? Like trying to figure out like what opportunities. So sometimes I get a little jealous. I especially get jealous when I realize she's going to graduate with like less than $5,000 in debt, which is
oh my god,
because she's going to live on she obviously right now because of the pandemic it's not an option, but she'll eventually like live on campus where I commuted, and I have pretty tens of thousands of dollars in debt. That's another thing. But just even comparing our 2 experiences, community college is a great option, and I wish it was presented that way, because I feel like it's not sometimes. I wish that people pursued the option that was truly best for them. There was like another point of something else I wanted to say. Whatever your last question was, if you could repeat it.
Yeah, it was just about navigating our Latino households and nuances. And you spoke about like maybe different gendered expectations from sister to brother, and just that if you had any like thoughts on that or any tips and tools on how to navigate that. I think one tool was be strategic as to when to have that conversation, which is true.
Yeah, I guess the other thing is like this is the space I feel like where I've had to do this the most, but to be your own advocate.
Mm.
Because I think you're right. You had mentioned earlier that like sometimes I feel like it happens in my family where I'm still viewed as very much my brother's little sister. Sometimes I feel like my mom still sees me as a kid. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm well into my late 20s, not a kid. And like the things that make me feel that way is that like sometimes when my mom has a question about something, she'll either ask my brother or she'll ask like a neighbor or a friend. But it's like something that like related to the field, like related to something that I know really well because of my work or my experience, etc. And so like having to tell my mom, like remind her like, no, like I can help with those things or I know more about that than you realize or um like or even if it's things like not related to work, like if there's like an issue, if like and I'm thinking of like things like bills or like
Yeah.
issues or like market, I don't know, like contracts and just like
Yeah.
daily
Yeah.
adult things. And it's like, hey, like I know when I was little, like what I did was like help you write the check and like translate things or whatever, but now I can help you understand this or I can take this on myself.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think it's those little things that are transitioning to say, hey, I can help with certain things, or I can help advocate for you when maybe they're not getting the respect or the services that they need or deserve. So that's super important too, is how do we advocate now for our families and our siblings now that we have this degree and these experiences and navigate certain spaces and network and maybe have a contact that can support us through it. I think is part of growing up and part of being first gen too. And I think I see it more as like more tools and more armor to kind of show up in the world, that in many ways is not set up for us to be here.
But also like doing it in a way that's like, I don't know if respectful is the right word, but like respectful or sensitive or like that isn't like have you watched the show Hempified on Netflix?
Oh, I haven't yet.
Okay, it's a great show focused on the issue of gentrification in Loyola Heights, which is an area here in Los Angeles. There's
Mm-hmm.
like one character that like he's kind of written so that like you're not supposed to really like him, but I can relate so much. So like, why is that me? And like the reason why he's not like the most likable is because like he went to college, has a 4-year degree, and like is coming back to help run his family's restaurant. And he's like, I have all these ideas. And
Mm,
everyone's like, okay, college boy, like that works in your college life, not here.
yeah.
But I think like to your point earlier, it's like finding ways to do it so like I can advocate for you, I can do this or do that, but like not in such a way that comes off as like I'm better than everybody because
Yeah.
I'm in college.
Or like white savior.
Yeah, and I don't think people perceive that way or act that way, but it can be perceived that way. I think many people go through the experience of like hearing from their family like, oh, you think you're so smart because you went to college, and it's like I have experience because I went to college and I know things, but I'm not pretending that I know more than everybody here. I don't.
Right. Yeah, because college gives you experiences, but our parents have a lot of life experiences that really um, make them super resilient. And I think that thought of like going back to our community. It's like, look, I have all these cool resources and networks and connections and I want to help. And how do we navigate that maybe in not a white savior complex kind of I'm here to save you type of thing, but more in like a Paulo Freire pedagogy of the oppressed way, where you're in communities to help them come up with their own solutions from a grassroots effort versus you as the knower of all things.
Yeah,
I love that, to kind of remind. I'm sorry?
It's another good book.
Yes, that's another that's another great book to put in your bookshelf and have handy. I was gonna say something and I forgot. Oh, another thing to your point, like I think at the beginning, was how you want the support from people to connect with you, and how we can support our community and our peers, like by sharing a podcast episode or an article, or help showing up to their conference event or their webinar or workshop to support them. I think is a really great way to share how to support in non-monetary ways, right? Because sometimes when people think of support, they automatically think, oh, are you going to ask me for money? And there are many ways to do it in a non-monetary way. Like if someone's starting a new project, right? Like share the project on your Facebook page or Instagram page, show up to their website, yeah, give them views on their website, or show up on their workshop or webinar. Even if you're not going to participate, just show up so they know they have someone connected to you and are supporting you. Because I think we forget sometimes that those little helps really make a difference.
Yeah, and I like that you pointed it out in helping in non-monetary ways, because if you have those means, by all means, like support people in that way. But if you don't, there's still other ways to show support. Because maybe I can't, like maybe right now isn't the best time for me to purchase whatever from the Etsy shop, but maybe it is for somebody else. And I'll share your Etsy with my network or something. One of my favorite things, I feel like I rarely get to do it, but sometimes I get to do it and it works, is connecting to people that I know, but like from two different spheres. Okay. And like bringing them together and like they work on something great. Mm-hmm. But I also love when people connect me with people I wouldn't have met otherwise, and like, let's make something happen. But it really comes down to like continuously building our own support networks. Mm-hmm. For like our, I think Audre Lorde has like a quote that's like, there aren't no single issue solutions because we don't live single issue lives. And I think that point is, we keep talking about like we need support, but like let's make it clear that it's like not one kind of support. There are different areas of our lives in which we need support in, and so it's important that we create support networks for ourselves that can support us in all areas of our lives.
Absolutely, right. Meet us at the different intersections of our identities to really become whole beings, right? That's kind of the goal, to be whole and show up in our most authentic self is part of that journey. And I love that quote by Audre Lorde. I will add it to the show notes if you do not know who she is and don't know that quote. It's one of my favorites too. So are there any other thoughts or tools or your teachings or musings that you would like to share with our listeners? I know we've talked all about many different themes, starting from college, career, imposter syndrome, how to be Latina, how to navigate conversations with parents, and how to listen to ourselves in our careers and our college life to really do what we want to do and curious about, and then showing support in non-monetary ways. So are there any last thoughts, any last musings?
No, but I guess if there's like a message that I had, like if there's like one thing you take away, I've said it several times, but really like the listening to yourself piece, because it comes in handy in more ways than one, whether it be, well, I think we all know more than what we give ourselves credit for intuitively. Like if we go with our gut, like that thing will get done. It will happen. Like we will thrive. But part of imposter syndrome and just really insecurity in general is kind of like shutting that voice down. And so like finding ways to make sure that we're not shutting that voice down. But that I think does take like an active effort of like checking in with yourself and like really like hearing that voice and like letting it guide you. I know that for me, I didn't do that in college, so I went through like 5 different majors before I found one that I liked, like at the same time. And recently, I had mentioned like I'm thinking about going to graduate school now. It's been 5-6 years from when I graduated undergrad. But a big reason like why there was that gap there is because I didn't know what I wanted to go to graduate school for, and it wasn't until I was like, oh, like wait, hold on, these are what my interests are. That I was like, I found a program that like, or kinds of programs that's like, okay, like these are the ones that I'm interested in, let's do these. Those are like the 2 examples of like a time that I didn't listen to myself, and then like how things change when I do. And I'm sure that there have been other instances where like, oh, like the answer was within me the whole time, which sounds really cheesy. But there is something to that there. So if there's like one thing that everyone takes away, I hope it's that, like, please like listen to yourself.
Yes, listen to yourself. And as cheesy as it might sound, is like you have the answers within you already. It's a matter of like, how do we unpack it? How do we unlearn many things that we have learned throughout our lives? And how do we listen to ourselves? And I think it's also give ourselves permission to listen to ourselves, and trusting that we know what's right for us, and trusting that we know, like, how do I, like, of course I know it's me.
And trusting that like even if you don't know, like you got the, like you will figure it out. Like you will find the answer, you will get it done. Just trust yourself.
Yes. So be honest with yourself, trust yourself, listen to yourself, and you will move into the direction that you need to be in, I think is a great way to continue the conversation and then end this kind of podcast episode. However, it seems like we'll be back with a part 2 with Alejandra, because we have so many more things to chat about. And I want to thank you for showing up today and having this awesome conversation with me. And hopefully people listening take something away, a nugget of wisdom and inspiration. And if there's something, a quote, tweet that Alejandra said that you love, please share it in the show notes or on Instagram or wherever you listen to these beautiful episodes. Thank you, Alejandra, so much for being here with me today.
Thank you. I feel like I got the opportunity to talk about elections and voting systems, and I mean, I love it. It's my work. But thank you so much for the space, for getting to talk about the space to talk about something else that's really important to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And wow, my friends, we just had an amazing conversation with my colleague, my friend. Make sure, if you want to get in touch with them or have follow-up questions, make sure you check out the show notes with their information, their contact, and how you can connect with them further. If you need any other support from me, make sure you download all the trainings, check out the YouTube channel, check out the workbooks that I've created for you all. And if you would like further assistance and support, make sure you check out my website, www.deliciaalarcon.com, for ways that you can connect with me and work together. And also stay tuned for the next episode. Until next time, enjoy your coffee, and I hope you enjoyed this chat. Cheers.